Thank you for testifying before this committee in this hearing. Last year, the administration also proposed revisions, another part of the provisions to the Clean Water Act were the regulations on wastewater. This blending proposal could allow for the discharge of untreated sewage into our waterways. We've seen in my district, which is a coastal district, and we've seen the results of this, what I consider misguided approach. During times of heavy rain, wastewater systems have failed, which results, then when we allow for this, weeks-long closure of our beaches and our waterways, which have to be done in order to protect the public from untreated, contaminated sewage. In 2005, EPA withdrew a similar proposal, in part because of the lack of evidence that blending will not adversely affect the environment or public health. Are you aware of any new analyses of the public health or the environmental impact of blending?
The team has been done extensive stakeholder outreach and is gathering the additional information. And let me be clear, we're not talking about discharging raw sewage into the waters of the United States or in other waters. That is not what our policy proposal is about. In fact, you put your finger on the real issue is in wet weather events, if you get too much flow through secondary treatment, after the grit screens and the primary clarifiers into secondary treatment, we primarily rely, most places, on bugs. Too much water will blow out those bugs. If you don't manage that, then the actual real environmental concern that I have is that you blow those bugs out and then you don't have the wastewater treatment system up and running. And so what we're trying to grapple with is how do systems manage the secondary treatment in a wet weather event such that they don't blow out the bugs?
But you're also, we need to know, do we know how many treatment or publicly owned treatment works engage in this process of blending? And are you going to gather that? And are they monitoring? Because you said it's not, we're blowing out sewage. Are we monitoring, EPA, the presence of pathogens in these blended? And could you give us that data?
Yeah, so one, I don't have the data with me, and I know the team is looking at it, but what we really do in most circumstances where the states have authorized blending, and a lot of times the states are the ones here are the permitting authority, if they are protecting the bugs, they bring the water back into the disinfection system that takes care of the pathogens. So when they blend it back in before it gets discharged, it does get disinfection.
Well, my concern is not to find some magic bullet like blending. We're really talking about investment. Too many cities have decades-old treatment infrastructure. Their capacity hasn't kept pace with population growth. But these investments depend upon federal support. Earlier, you talked about the successes of the WIFIA program, and we also have the State Revolving Fund program. Both of those are the backbone of our water infrastructure investment. What I'd like you to explain to me is why this administration has proposed severe cutbacks to both those programs.
Well, there are two answers. One, I think in the administration's proposals on budgets, they're trying to balance, kind of the budget fiscal responsibility, and some of the budget cuts they're proposing were to rely more on the states and the management of state resources.
So you're saying rely more on the states, and so increase or allow the states to propose these blending programs rather than provide the infrastructure, because this is an old, and in many cases, infrastructure that really needs rebuilding. And you've talked about the successes of these programs.
Yeah. So two things. One, my job first and foremost is to spend the money that Congress appropriates as intelligently, as appropriately as possible. So I get appropriations, and our job is to wheel the money out, the grant and loan programs. But on the blending issue, that's actually one of the questions is right now, because there's a different regulatory regime across the country because of an Eighth Circuit decision called Iowa League of Cities. There are different rules at play depending on what state you reside in. That's not regulatory certainty for the regulated community. And what happens is there are the entities that may have to be forced to run water around to protect their bugs are faced with some kind of contingent liability, and rather than, they actually have to think about upgrading their facilities through huge capital investment rather than thinking about managing the episodic overflow. So if you're
I
talking about
might-
infrastructure investment, it's actually, this is a more efficient way to go after
It
it.
may be a more range, and my time is up, but I would like to point out again that we're talking about when treatment facilities cannot handle, because of the peak flow of wastewater, and rather than investing in infrastructure, the administration is proposing cutting infrastructure investment. Thank you, and I yield back.